had this random thought yesterday where in Mexican Spanish, at least I can say in Mexican Spanish, I don't know if it happens in other forms of Spanish, but something that I really like in their colloquialism here is that they're very playful with words and word choice.
Yeah.
So instead of just saying yes, sí, they tell you Simón. And they'll go further and they'll give you examples of people named Simon, Simón del Desierto. And you just asked a yes or no question. And they do that all the time. If I ask my mother-in-law, what did you find at that store? And instead of saying nada, she says, naranjas agrias, like bitter oranges. And I love that kind of play on words.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if in English, you and I are having a conversation and we're talking about whatever the topic is, and I am going to tell you, well, that's the new norm. But instead of saying that's the new norm, I tell you, well, that's the new Norman Rockwell. Would that throw you off?
Yeah,
Would
Norman
you
Rockwell, I'd
talk
immediately
about-
go to those paintings.
But if I'm kind of taking that culture from Mexico and their play on words and what they tend to do, and I'm sticking it into English.
Yeah.
Man, that's the new Norman Rockwell. Are you going to be like, but we were just talking about the education system changing, and now she's bringing up Norman Rockwell? Do you think so?
Well, I mean, maybe it's the choice. I mean, when you say Norman Rockwell, probably not for younger people, but for at least
Our
for
generation.
middle-aged and older people, Norman Rockwell is a very specific. It's kind of iconic.
Absolutely.
So.
But instead of saying Norm, you use Norman. That's the new Norman.
Yeah, but if you said something, stupid like, have you started back to school yet after the coronavirus? And somebody says, nopis pinopis. If somebody said that, I guess, that would make kind of sense. But if you said Norman Rockwell, immediately it takes you to that place.
It changes. Yeah. Whereas here you say Simón del Desierto, and what you've captured was, oh, this person just made an affirmation.
Yeah.
This person said, yes, they are going to go to the store.
Or the people, when they say nopales, when they want to say no, nopales.
Mm-hmm.
I made a little sticker in my WhatsApp, just a picture of some nopales. So that when people sent me a message and my answer was no, I would just put the nopales.
That's a good one, because that works here. That works here. We don't.
And curiously, whenever I send it, nobody understands what I'm doing when I send it.
Going back to what we're saying.
Yeah. It's like, what's that supposed to mean? It's supposed to be like nope, as in like nopales.
We don't implement that. We don't do that in English in the United States, at least. Yeah.
Well,
are you aware of that?
No, without doubt. It's a big country with a lot of people, and I'm sure that there are people that have those kind of habits. But as a bigger part of the general culture, you don't think it that way. It's not common, and those little things, they don't catch on. And you'll see a lot of people, individuals that have really particular sayings that they say that are very particular to that individual. I've noticed that a lot in the United States.
Individual, part of the country, state.
No, just a individual person that have their own little personal expressions that, I don't know, maybe that person did hear something when they were a kid, but it sticks with them 50 years later, when they're still saying it. My mom would have expressions that she uses I've never heard anybody else use ever. She has expressions like when she's angry, I guess it's an alternative to saying shit. She would say, shoot a brick. She would say that. She'd have some other expression that would be like, when she didn't know how to react to something, she'd be like, I swanny the Pete. The hell's that supposed to be?
Shoot a brick. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, sometimes when you really got to put some extra syllables into it, it would be shoot a cotton picking brick.
Yeah, adding it on.
But who says something? I had a cousin once that would, and he would go through phases. I remember I knew him for several years. It was not a first cousin, second cousin. And I remember that his little personal expressions, they would just kind of, like every several months, there would be a new one, and the old one was just kind of like gone. But he would say things like, when he was mad or when he just saw something that he just couldn't even believe it and was beside himself, he would just be like, Jupiter.
Oh, why not?
But little things, of course, that's never going to catch on with anybody. Nobody's going to go around saying that expression later.
But that's also based on how you're saying it. So you understand how he's feeling. It doesn't even matter what it is he's saying. He could be saying
Yeah.
nonsensical words. And
Yeah.
based on the manner in which he's expressing himself,
Yeah.
you've got it. You know the feeling.
And that is kind of one, I don't know, it's a very generalized difference between people from the States or people from Mexico. Mexicans have a tendency, as you said, to be very proud of their creativity with the language and expressions that they use. I don't even know if I would say knowingly proud. It's just kind of one of these under the surface. I could say that you're very proud of that, and he's like, well, I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess you're right. But they're very proud of that, whereas I think the people in the United States are just as creative with language.
Oh, of course. I'm not saying they're not.
But they don't think of it in terms of, they don't necessarily take this pride in it. For example, saying this, you'll make somebody laugh and make somebody else offended. But if I had a Mexican and a gringo next to each other, and I said, okay, I guess, make me a list. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Make me a list of 10 idiomatic expressions that you use a lot. My guess would be, I would have to assume that the Mexican very quickly in 1 minute is going to be able to list 10 of them. And the gringo is going to tell you, well, I can't just come up with this stuff off the top of my head. And he's not going to write anything.
Give me context. Give me a situation, and it will come.
But in saying that he can't think of one, he uses one in trying to say that he can't think of one.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't occur to him. He doesn't consciously process that he's being creative with the language. Whereas the Mexican and in the culture, Mexicans tend to be more conscious about the fact that they're being creative with what they're saying, even if it happens in kind of subconsciously. Even if people learn how to say nopales and they don't even realize that they're saying that, but those things, they catch on really quick. And you notice it when, as a learner of Spanish, when they talk to you, they'll say something, say, you don't know what I just said, do you? Do you get that a lot?
Maybe at first.
But I mean, because I have this face that's not very reactionary. When people say
mine's
something,
quite the opposite.
Yeah, people will say something and they'll say, "No sabes qué acabo de decir, ¿verdad?" Because they're being very clever with it, and they know that they're being clever, and they know that they're using these things that, not only that because you're gringo, if you're not Mexican.
Oh, no, absolutely. Not a native Mexican Spanish speaker.
Yeah.
No, any culture and any language has so much creativity within them. It's just different. Absolutely, like you're saying. You ask me to give you some slang right now from the States, and I can come up with maybe a handful. I don't know, but it really does depend on context a lot. And going back to when we were talking about mistakes and mentioning what you're saying at the moment, where within the same language, there are different terms to use. And so I remember I spent some time in Puerto Rico, and I stayed on this island called Culebra. And I was making Culebra.
Okay.
Oh man, it's gorgeous. I think now it's all filled with like resorts and all that, but it was pre-resorts. It was pretty virgin and gorgeous many years ago. And I was making pizzas at the beach. Random,
Yeah, random. Yeah.
I like random things.
Yeah.
So they would have Fanta, and Fanta, it's an orange soda. So they would call it Fanta de Chino, as if oranges came from China. And orange juice would be jugo de chino.
Okay.
So I got used to that. I was like, okay, fine. I thought it was naranja. It was like one of those weird random words. Oh, there goes my cat.
Yeah.
That I knew. And I was like, okay, so it's jugo de chino, big deal. So I go to Spain years later, and I'm at the airport, and I want an orange juice. So I'm like, you know what? I got this. This is pre-Mexico. So I tell the guy, I was like, un jugo de chino. He looks at me like, what are you talking about? I can't even fathom what jugo de chino means. Until finally I had to point. He's like, oh, you mean naranja? I was like, okay. So it's perfectly understandable in one part of the world, and in a small one, it maybe isn't even just all of Puerto Rico. Maybe it's just Culebra.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't even use it anymore, but I swear they did about 10 years ago.
It could be just only on that little island, or it could be all of Puerto Rico. It could be just about 12 interrelated families that live on that beach that came up with that, you know.
It could be like the guy from the pizza stand I was working at, you know. And there I am ordering it in Spain.
They could have put some chopsticks in it, in your orange juice, and then they say, you know, well, give it just that little chino flavor.
Soy sauce, I don't know, something.